John, so excited to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm well, Stephanie. How are you doing?
I'm great. Well, I mentioned in the intro that you are the deputy autos editor over at Consumer Reports, and I just need to ask you right off the bat, what is your daily life like? I have visions of you just driving cars around a track all day long. Is that accurate?
Um, it was at one point earlier in my career, definitely to spend a little more time driving. I'm on the editorial side, so I write about the cars. So I definitely am in all of our products, all the vehicles that we are testing that we bought, vehicles that we may have rented from the auto manufacturers to try out and sample. So I'm in those every day. But there's also days that I'm behind my desk, pounding away at the keyboard.
Okay. Well, today we are talking about how my listeners can decide which new car is right for them the next time they need to purchase a new car. And this episode I really wanted to do because my 12-year-old hybrid, it has, I think, 180 something thousand miles on it. Stuff is breaking, expensive stuff is breaking. So I'm really excited to glean your wisdom. Today, we're going to talk about electric vehicles. We're also going to talk about hybrid electric vehicles and then just the, or sorry, hybrid plugins and then just the conventional hybrid. So before we get to any of that, let's make sure we're all on the same page with regard to what these three different types of cars are, how they're different. So let's start with the hybrid because they've been around for a long time. And so I think most listeners probably know what a hybrid is. So, what on earth is a hybrid vehicle?
Well, certainly. I mean, hybrids have been around for decades almost. Toyota is probably the best known manufacturer. They've gone all in with hybrids almost to the point of they've been slow with getting to electrics, which we'll get to. A hybrid vehicle marries a smaller battery, a small electric motor, and a conventional gasoline powered motor together. So, what happens is that the engine sometimes the gasoline engine will sometimes act as a generator. It will spin the electric motor to charge the battery can then backfeed to the electric motor to power the wheels, so it works in that harmony. At times with hybrids you can drive on electricity but only at real low speeds, almost slightly more than gliding. So you might be at moderate throttle, you're on the highway, you're on a flat side road or something like that, with very light touch on the throttle. And again, it depends on the auto manufacturer. Some may be a little more, little more aggressive, some less. You could drive on electricity, but basically what happens is that when you need to accelerate, when you need power, the hybrid system generally will kick in to help. So you're not really using as much gasoline. You're not running the engine as hard to do things, driving around town, accelerating on the highway. The hybrid system's in there to help. That's why you're getting such great fuel economy. With the Toyota Prius, you're getting into the 50s now. With the Honda Insight, which is being replaced for 2023, you're getting in the 50s. These vehicles, SUVs that you're getting into the 30 mile per gallon range, these are numbers that you're not seeing from a regular conventional gas powered vehicle. So that's what a hybrid does. It's a hybrid of two different systems.
Well, I must say, my 12-year-old hybrid, it's getting 45 ish miles to the gallon. And that has been so helpful as gas prices have risen this summer. But now let's talk about the plug in hybrid. This, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is newer technology. What on earth is a plug in hybrid?
So a plug-in hybrid basically is a conventional hybrid. So let's build on what we started with, but it has a larger battery. It may even have a slightly bigger motor, and it's a vehicle that you can plug in to charge that larger battery so that you can run purely on electricity for a short amount of time. So depending on the vehicle, you can do anywhere between 20 and 40 miles of pure electric driving. Early ones, sometimes you would kick in the gasoline engine a little. It would be a little easy to kick in the gasoline engine, but more often than not now, you could pretty much drive as hard as you want, almost. At some point, you'll kick in the gas engine. But you could drive on the highway. You can accelerate, go up a hill, pass people, and it's going to purely run on the battery. And then once you drain that portion of the battery, and you don't have any electricity left in the battery there, the vehicle reverts basically to hybrid operation. So the engine will sometimes help charge the battery. If you're when you're driving and you use the brake, or if you lift off the gas and you decelerate, it'll use regenerative braking technology so that that will charge the battery as well. And then it operates basically as a hybrid. So you go from pure EV, electric vehicle mode, to a hybrid operation. And they still get very good mileage. They're still going to get not quite near as a hybrid just because it's a heavier vehicle, you're carrying around a little more weight, but it still gets excellent mileage. And if you have a really short drive, if you're just driving around town, if you have a short commute, you can plug in, charge it relatively quickly, a few hours, and then drive almost as an electric vehicle without having that range anxiety that we'll likely talk about down the road.
That's almost my next question. But the plug in hybrid technology is newer. So, would you say in your hours on the track that these plug in hybrids on the market are worth the money? Should consumers be waiting a couple of years until the kinks are flushed out, or are they great? The ones on the market, are they great and ready to be enjoyed right now?
They're certainly ready to be enjoyed right now. The early Toyota Prius plug-in, a probably very well known one was the Chevrolet Volt, VOLT, which had the gasoline engine, which had the plug-in technology. You could drive 30-ish miles on it. That came out to great fanfare. They're they're very good vehicles. I mean, there's none that we've had that says it's awful. Some are a little less useful than the other ones because they have a limited range. The if you're only getting 20 miles of range in the vehicle, it may not be the best investment simply because you're spending a premium over a hybrid to get this vehicle that can only drive, again, 20 miles on electricity. Now it's quick to charge. And if you have free charging here and free charging downtown and you have a charger in your house, it may eventually pay for itself. But if you're looking dollars and cents, at that point, it's going to make a better financial decision or financial choice to go with a conventional hybrid rather than pay the premium on that. That said, the Toyota RAV4 Prime, the Toyota Prius Prime, if you're certainly driving 30 to 40 something miles on electricity, it eventually will pay off that price difference. This is a nice way for people to dip their toe into it. So there's nothing that should dissuade you from doing it as far as a technology standpoint of it not being ready for prime time. Um, but it's not something if you say, I want to go with an EV, this is EV like light, if you will.
So I think what I hear you saying is that a plug-in hybrid is a step towards a little tiny toe towards an electric vehicle. And we are going to talk about electric vehicles today. The zero tailpipe emissions option on the car market. Really quick for anybody who is confused about what an electric vehicle is. First of all, where have you been? EVs have definitely reached their tipping point. I drove a Prius circa 2008 and I was not cool. My car was not cool. But these days, Tesla, so cool, so sleek. People who don't care about tailpipe emissions are driving around town in their cool, sleek Tesla. So, for anybody who doesn't know what an electric vehicle is, give us your professional definition.
So an electric vehicle or is you'll hear people talk about it as an EV, or some areas you'll hear it referred to as a BEV, a battery electric vehicle. That's maybe an earlier term. And basically, it is a pure electric vehicle, drives only on electricity. It does not use a internal combustion engine at all, whereas a hybrid and even the plug-in hybrids use an internal combustion engine, uses gasoline. So the EVs are only electric. You have to charge it using an electric charger. So whether it's in your house or whether it's at work or local downtown has one, or a supermarket, etc., that's where you would fill up the vehicle, so to speak. Uh, Pros for it, certainly, there's no tailpipe emissions. You can talk about where the emissions stream is, on a whether it's generated by hydro, whether it's generated by solar, whether it's generated by coal. But for the vehicle, you're not spitting out any emissions from the tailpipe. Um, you can charge it overnight at your house, so that's a benefit. You're not running off to the gas station, so to speak. You can come home at night, plug it in if you have a charger. Now with an electric vehicle, you really need to have a full charger that's on a 220 volt. So um, you need to have sorry, 240. You need to have, it's like a dryer, electric dryer outlet. You have to have that somewhere in your house, garage or outside, because if you're using the 120 volt level one charging, it's called, it's just very slow. You're not filling a Tesla up from, or a Chevrolet Bolt, the BOLT. You're not filling up the Hyundai Ioniq 5, any of these full EVs overnight from empty on 120. Now, rarely will you drive an electric vehicle all the way down to zero, but there is a chance. And at that point, it would take hours, 11, 12, 13 hours to do it on 110, if not longer. So with a 240 charger, it'll take an overnight. It'll take somewhere 7, 8, 9 hours, depending on what it is, but you're doing it while you're asleep. You're doing it while you're not driving. You know, that's, you're driving this vehicle that is not putting out emissions. You're driving a vehicle that you're not waiting in line for gas. You're paying less money than if you were filling up the same vehicle, a similar vehicle with gasoline, even at higher electricity rates, such as in Connecticut. And a lot of them, many of them are eligible for tax credits, both federal as well as state and sometimes local. And then you may get something from your electric company as well for putting in a charger and letting them monitor it. So there's a lot of money that you can get with an EV that you're not going to be able to get with a gasoline car, and you may get some with a hybrid.
Well, thank you for those definitions, John. Now I want to talk to you about the considerations that listeners should have in the back of their minds when they go to potentially purchase a new vehicle, a new type of vehicle. And the first consideration always is the purchase price. So I think we all know that hybrids are a little bit more expensive. Excuse me, let me say that again. Hybrids are a little bit more expensive than conventional vehicles, and electric vehicles are a little bit more expensive than the hybrids, even. Do I have that right? I know these new technologies have been on the market for a while. Have the prices come down on the EVs or the hybrids at all?
So if we were talking, let's just say 2019 economy, you would get a hybrid at a discount, or you would pay a slight premium because maybe the manufacturer, to move the hybrid, would make it a little nicer. So instead of the base trim, the hybrid comes in at the second level trim, and it has a couple more niceties in it, and it costs $1,000 to $3,000 more than a conventional version. Some of that is, it has different technology, and the manufacturer's recouping it. Some of it comes with these other features. The way we are now, first of all, with inflation, but secondly, with the gas prices, hybrids are being sold at a premium by dealers. So there's a additional dealer markup, an ADM, it's a market adjustment, whatever lingo they want to use. You're often seeing that hybrids are hard to find. Conventional gas vehicles, while challenging to find, are easier to find. In comparison. Um, and it goes back to the same as you talk about your 2008. When gas prices back then were super high, all of a sudden you get pickup trucks at a discount and hybrids had a premium. 2 years before that, nobody wanted a hybrid, and everyone wanted a pickup truck. So it goes with the cycle of fuel prices. But in general, yes, a hybrid's a little more. The plug-in hybrid will then come at a premium on top of that. The Toyota RAV4 Prime is certainly much more expensive than a regular RAV4 and a RAV4 hybrid, but it's a nicer vehicle inside as well. So there's leather, there's more standard features. It has the added benefit of being a little quicker, a little more responsive. So it's almost a different animal, if you will. EVs still are premium priced. You're talking, the least expensive are the Nissan Leaf, Chevrolet Bolt, um, the Hyundai Kona electric, the Kia Niro EV. They are being discounted. Their older technology. The Bolt is relatively new, but the other ones are slightly older models. They're much more entry level. You could get them before so the Kia and the Hyundai and the Nissan are still eligible for the $7,500 federal tax credit. So you can get them if they're available in the high $20,000, low $30,000 range before the credits. Chevrolet has used up their credits. You can't get those with the Bolt. So they're at a pricing disadvantage in some ways. But other ones are still in the maybe with if you're figuring in the incentives in the $40,000 range, but really a lot of them are in $50,000, $60,000 range. So you pay a lot for that vehicle, but it's an investment in the sense of you're putting in a charger and you're likely holding on to this vehicle for a while, or you're into the EV world. And right now you can buy one and probably flip it relatively easily if you needed to a year or so down the road. If it just didn't work out for you, because they're desirable. They're increasing in sales numbers, and people are looking and trying to, clamoring for some of them.
You said a lot there that I want to touch on. For listeners who have price as their number one purchasing concern, what are your thoughts on choosing a used EV model?
As with any vehicle purchase, it's just key really to know the history of the car. Buying a used EV, no one has really used up the battery on an EV at this point. So even if you're buying one of the more early Teslas, which would be, the more mass-produced mainstream early models, you still are going to have decent life with it. Every individual case may be different. Someone may, there may be a problem with the battery. The person, it just may have been abused, not charged, but there's outliers. But for the most part, buying a used EV, a good way to, again, dip your toe into the market if you wish without a huge investment. You don't get the credits. You don't get a tax benefit of that. The thing with some of them, with Tesla in particular, is you have to worry about Tesla sometimes will turn off technology that came on the car because they can do that remotely, and then you'll have to buy the technology again, so to speak. So the autopilot, the advanced driver assistance systems, things like that, you may have to pay for. So you have to pay Tesla after you buy the vehicle from someone. But it's a fine thing to do, going in there and maybe it's again, it's recycling the vehicle, if you will, without dismantling it. Buy someone's Nissan Leaf. They've had it for a number of years. It's lost a little bit of range, but you're getting into it. You're figuring out if it's good for you. So no problem with that. Probably the best financial decision really is to go into the world of a hybrid, purely if you're looking for saving money and gas and fuel efficiency at this point in time.
Well, you mentioned the federal tax credit there a few times. So tell us more about that. I'm not sure that everybody listening even knows that here in America there is a federal tax credit. And I know that it's not on all models. So break that down for all of us.
Certainly. So the federal tax credit, which we have a story about it on consumerreports.org that kind of outlines a lot about it. It's up to $7,500, but it's a credit. So unlike other incentives such as a rebate or something like that, you only get the money as a credit against your taxes. So if you file federal income taxes and you owe, that money, depending on the vehicle you buy, can wipe out up to $7,500 of your bill. So the first thing that we suggest here at Consumer Reports is definitely talk to a tax professional if you're anticipating buying an electric vehicle and applying for this credit, because you don't want to end up being someone who is worried about the IRS, pays a little more each paycheck, you expect a refund, and then you say, oh, I'm going to get $7,500 back. You're not going to get anything. They don't cut you a check. So it's good to plan your taxes that way. But basically, it's based on the size of the battery, and it goes up to a certain size. So the hybrids, plug-in hybrids, would get credits. Toyota, so the vehicles will get credits based on the size of their battery, up to the $7,500. And then if a manufacturer sells 200,000 models or vehicles, let me say vehicles, so specifically it said sold 200,000 plugins, EVs, what have you, then the credit begins to phase out. So, and it's a certain calendar time, and it goes to half. And then after a certain period of time, it goes to half again, and then it's done. So if a manufacturer sells a vehicle that's worth $7,500, it drops in half, then drops in half again, and then that's it. There is a lot of talk There's a lot of talk in Congress about being able to extend this so that there's not a limit on it. There's a lot of talk about Congress also extending it maybe to even used vehicles. So, if you're buying a used vehicle, you get a credit again. But right now, it's capped at 200,000. General Motors, Tesla, and now Toyota are the manufacturers who've reached it. Toyota's in the beginning of the phase out stage starting this October. So if you're looking to buy a Toyota plug-in or an EV, do it now so you get the full credit because on October 1st it begins to phase out.
So helpful, John. Thank you. Now, John, I want to talk to you about charging and charging stations. For a lot of consumers, the charging question for the plug-in hybrids and the EVs, that is stress inducing. However, as I was preparing for this episode, I learned that the average American's commute is 32 miles round trip. So to work and back, 32 miles. That's the average American's commute. Based on that number of 32 miles, are our concerns with regard to charging and maybe being left on the side of the road with no battery power, are those concerns warranted?
I don't want to be the person who says that anyone's concern is not valid because, and I'll give you my two examples. When we first bought our Nissan Leaf, the first generation one that we tested, it was only sold in California. We ordered it. It was shipped across the country. It was dropped off at our test track. We charged it for a little bit. I drove it home that night, 22 miles away. And I had, I think, about 40 something miles, 50 miles of range left. And the next morning was cold and rainy and dark. And I had to drive on the highway and I ran the heat because it was so chilly and I ran out of electricity. And that's a growing pain. Now, did I someone may listen and say, well, you were pushing it and you should have known. And certainly, and it was a learning. I was a pioneer, if you want to say, within Nissan Leaf for our company. But it is a thing that's anxiety producing, and with some vehicles, yeah, I've taken them home and driven them, and I've thought about it, but I have never gotten to that point since. Even in the winter, even when it's cold, even when running the heat, I may have seen the range drop, but then the range has gone up as the car warmed up. So the key thing really to think about is how do you drive normally? I mean, we're not at a point in time right now where you can't find a gasoline car. So you can't rent a gasoline car, you can't own one, you can't borrow one. If you take a long trip once a year that exceeds 230 miles at a clip, let's just say, you may want to rent a car and own an EV. If you daily drive 120, 130 miles, 140 miles, or even 200, okay, maybe you want to wait until there is a more widespread network out there of chargers besides just Tesla and there are companies Electrify America, etc. But um, maybe you want to wait until your area is more populated with chargers. But for the most part, and I'll tell you from my experience, I do have a charger in my house, and I am about 25 miles from our test track. There are plenty of times where I have taken home an EV. I've driven it all around. I've driven my kids to school, to the camp bus. I've even had to drive to camp to pick them up for a doctor's appointment, come home, bring it back to the test track. I don't have to charge it. I've driven 200 something miles and I still have range. Cold affects batteries, extreme heat affects batteries, running the heat in the car, things like that. They definitely do have a greater drain on the battery. You may have to adjust a little bit of your driving, but there are remedies for that, particularly seat ventilation, so it blows cool air in the seat heaters, steering wheel heaters to help you so you could pre-charge the vehicle. You keep it plugged in on your if you have a charger at home, it warms it while it's still plugged into your electric grid. So there's ways around it. For the most part, a lot of it is just people don't know. And until you experience it, and it's a big thing to take a big step in and say, I'm going to buy this and find out if it works for me. It's a big thing.
I think it's important to remember too that, electric vehicles on the low end will go around 100 miles to on the high end around 300 miles. And then the sweet spot, the average, is around the 200-mile range you can go before needing a charge. You did mention there that you have a charging station in your home. I'm wondering, what does that entail? The thought of calling an electrician, getting that gigantic charger in the garage, is another step towards an EV or a plug-in hybrid purchase. Uh, and then there's that added cost too. So tell us more about that.
Certainly. So we tried out at Consumer Reports a number of chargers. I'm not endorsing the one I bought, but it was very simple. The one I bought is by a company, Juicebox. It's one of the ones that was that performed well in our evaluations. We didn't put them through full tests. I mean, size wise, it's not too massive. I mean, it has a long cord, but I mean, if you could see, it's not a big item. Um, I have a more modern house, so it was easy with my garage and the location to just drop a line down to my electrical panel. Certainly understand people who are in apartments or condos. It's much more difficult, if impossible. People with older houses, detached garages. There's definitely some more work that may be done. But it's also just the benefit of technology today in that I ordered it online and it was drop shipped to my house. They will ask you, are you going to hardwire it in, or are you going to have a plug in the wall where you can hardwire it in there. It's an electrician does a little more work, or the electrician can put a plug in, and then that way you can try different box. You could sell the box if you don't want. You could buy a different charger as technology changes and just plug it in there. I chose to go that route, but also just so much information out there as far as people in your area, electricians who are knowledgeable about this. The better electricians wherever you live will have said, "Oh, this is something that I should investigate. I should brush up on. I should know about." And they'll be that person who almost leads you to what the best solution is. The electrician I found had done a number of installs, and he and I chatted about it, the best place. So it really wasn't a logistical problem. It was quicker than I thought. It's going to add. It's certainly an investment. Could be thousand, $1,400 for a charger, depending on what you buy. It could be three, four, $500 depending on what the how much time it takes the electrician to do it. But once you're there, now you have the ability to charge in your house, and you're not visiting that gas station at all, and you're always guaranteed to have. Let me rephrase that. As long as it's not a power outage, you're not going to worry about having a place to be able to charge. Whereas if you're relying on going to work, for example, and charging at work, someone may be charging during the day, and you'll have to run out and update, and plug in, or more people bring their EV. So it is that benefit of having at least that there's always a charging station available for you, and you just do that. You're charging at home versus somewhere else.
I'd like to transition and discuss maintenance costs. With these new technologies, do they need more frequent um, service appointments? Are such services more expensive than conventional vehicles? Talk to me.
So one of the benefits of an EV in particular versus the plug-in hybrid or a hybrid is that you're doing away with a lot of the regular maintenance issues that you were dealing with a gasoline internal combustion engine. So there's no oil changes, for example. You're not dealing with just a lot of the regular maintenance that catalytic converters going bad after a certain amount of time, exhausts issues, just there's just things that you don't have to deal with. You so your regular scheduled maintenance, the thing every 3,000 miles come in for an oil change and this and the transmission, it's just different. You're eliminating that, but they still are vehicles. So what we've seen in our data is not always that the electrical systems are problematic, but a lot of the vehicles, if they suffer from problems, they do suffer from similar ones to conventional vehicles with other electronics, infotainment systems. There could be transmission things. There could be the climate control. It could be a suspension issue. So you're not getting away of some of the problems that you might still find rear their head with a regular car, but you're getting rid of some of the day-to-day maintenance stuff. There are other things, however. Consider that you may never have thought about cooling for the electric motor, but they do need that. And this isn't a problem. It's just an example. Audi, with their e-tron electric vehicle, has a service interval where you have to change the fluid for the coolant for the rear axle for the drive motor. That's not something that someone that you might think like, oh, the coolant for that's an interesting thing. So there are other services, but you do get rid of some of the more common ones that are little niggles, if you will, with owning a gasoline powered vehicle. Um, so yeah, it's a trade off, but we've seen that the electrical systems have been very robust. I mean, the most reliable vehicle by far that you could talk about, Toyota Prius. The Toyota hybrid systems have just been great. They have their new EV out. We'll see how that is. But if you're worried really about the electrical system, I would look at a established manufacturer versus a one that's a startup, so to speak. And go with that. But rest assured, you'll probably have more issues with the touchscreen infotainment system and the climate control thing that's right here versus driving to and from where you need to go.
Interesting. My final question for you, John, is for the listeners who just love to drive. They have a joy of driving. Early hybrids, perhaps even the early EVs, they had a reputation of being decidedly not fun to drive. And I am looking at my 2008 Prius. Are the alternate technologies that we've been discussing today on the market? There are so many of them. Are they fun to drive? And in your answer, I'm wondering if you can talk specifically to people who are, I'm assuming you love to drive as the Deputy Autos editor, but talk to people like you who just have a joy of driving and are reluctant to drive some boring, ho-hum, slow, low acceleration vehicle.
Well, I'll first put aside the notion that today's hybrids and EVs are slow just because they all deliver the electric power immediately. So yes, the early Priuses and the GM EV1 electric car decades ago at this point. Yeah, they're all tuned for fuel efficiency. Nobody saw the auto manufacturers saw the market being fuel efficient. They didn't see it as being performance. They were attracting a buyer who was concerned about that, and the car was built for that. And the technology really needed to be built for that. Today, I have an older sports car in my garage, and I'll tell you that most of the EVs, all of the EVs, and most of the hybrids that we test today are quicker than it. It's just off the line. It's that. I mean, if you think about an electric vehicle, electricity for that vehicle delivers it like a light switch. It's on, it's off. Or it's off and then it's on, and you have full power, and you could zip away. There are ones that are certainly more enjoyable handling wise. Porsche, for example, makes the Taycan. It's expensive, yes, it's a Porsche, but it shows that you can have a sports car that's an electric vehicle. Their next generation smaller sports car is going to be electric only or have an electric only option. So there are models out there. More coming. The Kia EV6 is enjoyable to drive. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 is enjoyable to drive. BMW has an i4. It's almost as exciting to drive, fun to drive as their M4 sports sedan. So there are options there. There's a trade-off, of course. Like any sports car, tires are going to be grippier, more expensive. They'll wear out quicker. You're going to use up the electricity in the battery quicker. It's just like anything. You floor it in your gas-powered sports car, you're going to use up the gas. You floor it in the EV, you're going to use up the electricity. But auto manufacturers know that this is the future, that they are coming. So there's some that are out there. You have to order them. There is a joie de vivre, if you want, with driving. Does it replace a turbocharged sports car with a 5-speed or 6-speed manual transmission? It's not exactly the same, but it's different. It's different. It's in some ways almost like driving a race car, because modern race cars are automatic transmissions that shift for themselves, or with a paddle. So it's a different feeling. But there are cars out there for the driving enthusiast, albeit right now they are a little more expensive.
You mentioned the Porsche Taycan there, and as I was researching for this episode, I was shocked to learn that that model comes in at, or starts, excuse me, at around $150,000. But thank you also for mentioning the less expensive options on the market as well. And so, what I hear you saying, John, is that we are at a unique moment in time with regard to the automobile conversation, because there is a vehicle for every one and every type of driver. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. There are, I would say that the driver that has the hardest time finding something is going to be someone looking for an entry level car, something that's in the $14,000 to $20,000 range with an EV, just simply because of the cost of the technology and what automakers are charging and have to put in a vehicle, or they thought they've had to put in a vehicle to entice people to come into it, make it a little nicer, a little more leather, a little quieter, a little more sound deadening to keep, because you don't have a gasoline motor and an exhaust making noise. They have to make it with a little more sound deadening inside to keep the outside noise from coming in. That's one thing with an EV. You drive an EV, you realize all of a sudden, wow, I can really hear the wind. Before, the gas engine masked that sound. So that's where you would buy, someone who would buy a used EV, like we discussed earlier. Someone who's, in a more of an entry level car, you would look for that used EV, a pre-owned one. But they are coming down in price. You're seeing more and more auto manufacturers are introducing vehicles that um, they have a little bit of performance from it, as well as fuel efficient, or the electrical efficiency, if you will. Excuse me. So it's close. I wouldn't say every single person is going to get exactly what they want, but it's getting much closer as far as the offerings out there.
I will link to the research that we discussed today via Consumer Reports in this week's show notes. John, I want to thank you for an amazing, content rich discussion, and I hope to have you on the show again, maybe 10, 15 years to the future, and we can discuss how the electric vehicle market changes. I mean, we are in a moment of such transition, which I personally, as somebody who knows nothing about cars, doesn't really care about driving, I think that's cool. So thank you so much.
Now, Stephanie, I enjoyed it greatly. Thank you very much.